I'm standing here on the Knoll at the site of the Battle of Bannockburn. Now, from where I'm standing, this is the English view. This is where Edward II and his commanders would have been able to oversee their own army, but also where they saw the Scots approach. Now, this is quite phenomenal. On this knoll, the Earl of Gloucester was having an argument with the rest of the commanders and King Edward. He wanted to rest the troops, but Edward said no. Now, early that morning, the Scots made their way out of Balquhidderock wood in the distance there, and they slowly but purposefully crept their way forward. To my left there is the Great Bend in the Bannockburn. Eventually, Gloucester from this point sees the Scottish army likely around where that hedge is, just in the distance. In a panic, because the Scots are closing ground. It says that Douglas's men ran to close off the ground, and then they knelt and set their pikes. Gloucester comes down from this knoll, mounts his horse. Everyone's in confusion at the sight of the Scots, which were a formidable army, and they were described as a dense forest with their spears. He's gone down there. He hasn't even been armoured up. Probably doesn't have a helmet. He hasn't grabbed a lance. He grabs a sword and he rides hurtling headlong into Douglas's division there, where he's unhorsed, and he's killed. It said he was pierced by many wounds. The rest of the people, the army, are watching in confusion. Remember, you got wagons out here. You got cooks, you got hangers-on, you have prostitutes, you have everything that comes along with an English army. Now, if you imagine the whole line of Scots from left right to the centre there, where the pond is, and over to the extreme right, where the Pell stream runs down that set of trees, you're talking about a distance of about 831 yards after they've closed the Great Bend of the Bannockburn there. That takes a dense amount of Scots. So there weren't 5,000, there were not 6,500 Scots. These Scots were able to halt the cavalry charges, and you probably had somewhere in the region of 800 knights in the first cavalry charge. And it said there was a great crash of spears and destriers wounded to the death. If you had pikemen with their lines 20 deep, you're talking a Scots army here in the region between 20 and 30,000 strong. Remember, Bruce had a year to prepare for this. He was also a charismatic leader, but everything hung on this battle here. Bruce was in the centre, just where you see the swans in the pond there. He was just before that pond. Now, he either went through it or he went around it, but he was closing in. Moray closing in on the far side. Douglas's division here. But there was a jamming that took place after the first cavalry charge. The second cavalry charge, they got stuck behind them. The third, they got stuck behind them. Archers couldn't use their arrows because they're firing in a high parabola, and it's coming down. They're hitting their own men in the back, or it's glancing off Scottish helmets. So they're told to stop firing. Because of the confusion, the foot soldiers press forward, and there's a great pressure between the English cavalry and the foot soldiers that have closed the distance behind them. There's a great crush, there's a great panic as the Scots stab and hack their way through. Eventually the rout takes place. King Edward here is led off this field. The English scatter over that far side where many of them perish in the treacherous Bannockburn. Some would have been killed that way at all as well. But the rout would have been catastrophic, and King Edward is led off this knoll. But this is where the English camped. Bruce knew this. This is where Bruce wanted to hem them in. He's an incredible genius to pick the ground and pick the way this fight was going to go. There were no Scottish light cavalry. That is a myth. None of them are mentioned in the English chroniclers. And the most useful chroniclers who'd all written within a year of the battle. So this is absolutely amazing. So the Scots were all on foot, and they were considerable in number, and Bruce's plan worked to a T. This is where the elite English army of that time they were routed, and many of them met their end. And as a king, it was Edward II, the Plantagenet. It was his undoing, but it was Bruce's and Scotland's greatest triumph. It's an amazing experience just to stand here and soak this in. Bannockburn, 1314.